All right, everyone. For this week's topic, we are going to be talking about perspective. Artists use perspective to represent three-dimensional objects and spaces on a two-dimensional surface, a piece of paper or canvas, in a way that looks natural and realistic. Perspective can create an illusion of space and depth on a flat surface or the picture plane. Perspective most commonly refers to linear perspective, the optical illusion using converging lines and vanishing points that makes objects appear smaller the farther away from the viewer they go. Zero or atmospheric perspective gives things in the distance a lighter value and cooler hue than things in the foreground. Foreshortening, yet another type of perspective, makes something recede into the distance by compressing or shortening the length of the object. So we were going to be doing our assignment thinking of perspective as it relates to linear perspective, but perspective is also a term that you can use to describe your own personal opinion or point of view. So that is also a way that you can even talk about your feelings or talk about art, just to expand on that vocabulary a little bit more. So here's an example of a Persian miniature painting, which in this period of time, people weren't really considering how to use linear perspective within their art, but they certainly were concerned with how the eye moved over the picture plane, which is actually them considering composition. So there is a composition as your eyes go through these men on horses and up through the tent and up through the hills and up here and through the scriptures. So this is a very flat image, and it is being deconstructed by the artist's use of texture and color. But there is very little going on with there is no vanishing point really. Maybe I think there's like some sort of atmosphere happening where, at least in these purple lavender mountains, there is like it feels a little bit darker the further you go. But other than that, it's really all just flat and one dimensional, and there is no perspective being considered. So in the this is a Byzantine work of art here. The Byzantine, medieval, Gothic periods when artists didn't really use any sort of linear perspective. It's definitely possible that people did understand linear perspective, but it somehow maybe got lost in translation, or for some reason wasn't being used. I'm not sure. It's just all a matter of I'm not really a historian, but it's what historians speculate. But I do personally feel like they did understand linear perspective, and how to appropriately use it, and to a certain degree, because even in these works, it works from the 1300s, there was still some sort of understanding of a vanishing point. Although the vanishing point doesn't match up where all of these converging or receding diagonal lines don't all meet up on the horizon. So it's definitely there. The people are painted pretty realistically. There is some dimension there. There are some planes at which they exist on, but they exist on separate planes, not the same one. So it's not, there's not really creating a real illusion here. So these are going to be on your little quiz. Your quiz is going to be not that hard, I don't think at all. But you might want to just try to remember this and jot this down so that you don't have to go back through this PowerPoint and remember this. So the quiz will cover just terms of what we have understood about design so far, before we get into color, and then you'll have a color quiz too. But linear perspective is the vanishing point is located inside of the painting. Axonometric perspective, which is the neutral point of view out of the space, the lines of the object remain parallel and bring it closer to the witness. Reverse perspective is the vanishing point is located outside of the painting. We're gonna only be doing linear perspective for this week, this week's assignment. But these kind of tricks are cool to have up your sleeve too. I mean, if you want to ever design something and use perspective, and maybe you're talking about neutrality, trying to create neutrality between the subject of your design and whoever's looking at your design, you can use axonometric perspective. You can also use reverse perspective to maybe talk about to create space that goes outward. So these are all little tools and tricks that you can have up your sleeve for when you create designs in the future. Although, like I said, we're focusing on linear perspective. So this is a drawing by Filippo Brunelleschi, from Florence, an Italian man. This is like 15th century. He demonstrated an understanding of linear perspective, which broke the continuous way of how people were using perspective before. He discovered that there is a vanishing point. The vanishing point being here. He discovered that the vanishing point is lined up with the horizon, where our heads as viewers is gazing into the two-dimensional picture plane. And also he discovered how lining up these orthogonals, our receding diagonal lines, also creates the linear perspective illusion of space. I'm not gonna go really deep into it. I really would like you all to watch the videos that I put up on Canvas for you. So there's a video covering exactly how Brunelleschi conducted this experiment in Florence. And it was just pretty much a way of him lining up this painting that he did of the baptistry with a mirror. So go ahead and watch that so you can learn a little bit more about how he demonstrated this first experiment of linear perspective. So this is an example by the early Renaissance painter Masaccio. He's Italian. He was the first Renaissance painter to incorporate Brunelleschi's discovery into art. So as you can see here, there's the vanishing point, which always exists on the horizon. And there are the converging diagonal lines coming down into the vanishing point here. So it's making us feel like he, as an artist, has used the perspective to make us feel like we are down lower before this image of Jesus on the cross, like we're down below him and we're looking up at him. So it's an illusionistic tool to place your viewer wherever you want them to be placed. You can make them feel lower. You can make them feel higher. It's actually a really wonderful tool, as I keep saying, that you can use to really create a stronger message within your work. So there are 4 types of linear perspective. There is a 1-point perspective, which is frontal, 2-point perspective, which is angular, 3-point perspective, which is oblique, and multi-point perspective, which has up to 6 vanishing points. So 1-point perspective is the simplest method of drawing perspective. It uses only a single vanishing point on the horizon line. A vanishing point is where 2 or more parallel lines converge into each other at infinity, which is Infinity is here. A good example of this type of perspective is a long hallway or railroad track or road where the viewer is positioned face on looking down the center. As you can see in the illustration, the two tracks are parallel to each other, and you know that they will remain the same distance apart. However, the further away they get, the closer they appear to be until they eventually disappear. So 1-point perspective is used to create the illusion of distance in a drawing or painting. So this is the horizon line. This is the vanishing point. This is where all of the lines of the image converge into the distance. The higher that, in this illustration, let's say that they made the vanishing point even higher, it could feel like there is even more distance between you, the viewer, standing here, and the horizon that's vastly far away. You could eat this in this 1-point perspective illustration. If the vanishing point was here, it wouldn't seem so far away. So that's just a trick that you could use with 1-point perspective. This is going to be a part of your assignment. I just want you to be able to do these really quick thumbnails. So here is a 1-point perspective scheme. There's a horizon line. So us as a viewer, as we're standing looking at this, like our head should be right here, if that makes sense, where we're standing, we're looking at the vanishing point. And this is an interior. This illustration is of an interior. And so the vanishing point, the horizon line, and then we have all the lines from the ceiling, and the wall and the floor. All of the lines are converging through the vanishing point. So 2-point perspective comes into play when a drawing contains two vanishing points positioned arbitrarily along the horizon line. This perspective positions the object where the viewer can look at the object from an angle and see two sides at one time. That is, looking at one corner with two sets of parallel lines moving away. So 2-point perspective is used to make geometrical objects appear to be three-dimensional. So yeah, you can imagine this could be used for a corner, like this is a corner of a bedroom, or you can use this to demonstrate some sort of type of box. Use perspective when drawing a box or an object, as I mentioned. And so here we have the horizon line, and this is 2-point perspective. So there are two vanishing points. Vanishing point 1 over here, vanishing point 2 over here. So this is the corner, and then these lines converge from the corner into the vanishing point to create a 2-point perspective. Yeah, so like I said, good for drawing corners of spaces, interior spaces, or even exterior spaces, I guess, and really great use for drawing any sort of geometric type of object in this that could feel up close. See how it feels like a box with these 2 points of two vanishing points, and then this one feels like an interior. Lastly, that we're going to cover in this PowerPoint is 3-point perspective. So it's a little trickier than the other two because this type deals with 3 vanishing points. It includes 2 vanishing points somewhere on the horizon line, and there's also a vanishing point either above or below the horizon that all vertical lines lead to. This type of perspective is great for rendering objects such as buildings and cityscapes that are seen from the aerial ground or bird's eye perspective or ground view from a worm's point of view. When the third vanishing point is above the horizon line, then an image is created from an ant's perspective that is looking up towards the image from below. When it is below the horizon, a bird's eye point of view is created where it feels as though you're looking down on the object from above. So this is 3-point perspective is commonly used actually in like a lot of comic books. So it's great. It's a really great tool for like in a comic book when the villain is um, like looking up at the superhero who's up here. It's a very much creating a huge dramatization. This trick is like can create a huge dramatization of where your viewer stands. So you can use it to make your viewer feel like they're looking down on top of a really tall building, or they're looking up at a really tall building. And you can even kind of see how that this image does that too. If you stare at this for a second, you can see that it kind of plays with your eyes. You don't know if you're looking up or down at it. So 3-point perspective is used to render building scenes such as cityscapes, complex close-up objects, highly detailed interior scenes, great for dramatizations. And here is an example of 3-point perspective. It has 3 vanishing points, 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, all of the lines are depending on what direction the object is faced in, the lines all converge up with the vanishing points in this cube. So multi-point perspective is used to create image with 4 to 6 vanishing points to create that fisheye effect, which we've seen with Susan Waters Eller's work and MC Escher's work, which I also have in Canvas. So like we've seen it quite a bit, and I have a video that I would love for you to watch to understand how to draw the 6-point perspective. And it's not something that I expect anyone to really try to do for their assignment, but if you did want to try to make your interior with or their assignment with 6-point perspective, you're welcome to do that. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. So then there is 0-point or atmospheric perspective, used when there are no parallel lines in an image to create a sense of depth. 0-point perspective is the technique used to give the illusion of depth when there are no parallel lines in the image and therefore no vanishing points. Vanishing points can only exist with the presence of parallel lines. However, a perspective without vanishing points can still create a sense of depth. That's where 0-point comes into effect. The most common example of depth without parallel lines or vanishing points is a natural setting such as a mountain range or a landscape of hills and valleys. Or as we know, this little scientific rendering of the coronavirus that we always are seeing is an example of an atmospheric perspective. So when this is obviously like organic shape, there are no parallel lines in this organic shape. And instead of using parallel lines to converge this into the distance, there are rather tricks that the illustrator is using, such as the colors in the foreground are much brighter, and the details are you can see the little crevices and cracks. Those are very clear, as opposed to when you look at one that is in the background, you can't see the texture so much. And also the color has become quite subdued. So this is an example of how to use the atmosphere of an image to create depth, as opposed to using parallel lines and linear perspective. And lastly, there is foreshortening. So this is used to create the illusion of an object receding into the background. So foreshortening is happening in this foot, as far as seeing like the toes go smaller, and kind of you don't even get to see the pinky toe anymore. So there's foreshortening here even. And then there's foreshortening. This is a more extreme example of foreshortening, which is, as you can see, how the toes are lining up and even almost becoming even the same amount, like they're even bigger than the heel here. So this is an example of foreshortening. That's something that you would do with like a figure, which we're not doing for our assignment, but it's good for you to know. And here is an illusionistic painting. Maybe you've seen it before. And this is, I just wanted to show you that this is like, there's definitely a lot of an illusion of space, but without using parallel lines. Minus there, that is happening with the way that the artist illusionistically painted the frame. But besides that, like using foreshortening here, as well as even like the thumb and how the wrist is bigger than maybe the elbow here. So there's foreshortening happening within this figure, and also the way that it's painted with the light coming very forward and it being in the dark is a really good example of how to create depth without using linear perspective. David Hockney is a really cool artist that I really like all of his drawings of the objects in his life. And I have a video I want you to watch on Canvas of him just talking about perspective. It's like he is a really interesting artist because he'll, like, for example, there's these chairs here. So he'll paint these chairs, but he won't just paint them from one point of view. Like he'll get up and walk around them a whole bunch of times in order to see how he can kind of disorient the perspective a little bit, the linear perspective a little bit, to kind of create more life or more character in his chairs. And so this is a sculpture, or like a literal chair that he created, that he made purposefully the perspective to be wonky and the perspective to be off, which he always does within his paintings. But I just think that's a really cool way to approach making a chair, as opposed to always following the perspective as we know it, or how a chair is constructed as we know it. Like he gives us the opportunity to enjoy a chair and sort of question if we are even looking at a chair that is functional, a chair that can exist in a space, a three-dimensional world that we can even understand. I just think that he has like a really cool approach to how he plays with perspectives with these objects that are just chairs. So this is a little illustration by a designer named Richard Chadwick. And I just think it's kind of cool how there's a vanishing point, or like there are two ways that he's using perspective in one picture plane. So there's like this area and then there's this area, but he has seamlessly converged these two perspectives, 1 and 2, into like one picture plane it feels very realistic, but it's I don't know, it's just is kind of like a way of creating a space that you can go in and out. And also I really like the approach of like how there's like color on one side and just black and white on the other. Another designer, so Sergio Rodriguez is going to be the master artist that we look at for our assignment. And he's a Brazilian designer, and he actually is pretty well known in Brazil. He got famous for this like type of armchair that he made, and also using like more exotic and stronger types of woods in his chairs and furniture. And this image is a little bit more crisp. So he was born in 1927. He passed in 2014. He's known as the father of Brazilian furniture. I have a website that I want you to look at in Canvas that just is going through all of his different like furniture designs. They're cool. They just are like they're all made, like I said, with these natural materials, and they embody like a Brazilian culture and Brazilian comfort and Brazilian lifestyle. And so as you can see here, I want you to just look at, even though this isn't a design of his chair, this is a drawing that he did, and it's fairly simple. He's dealing with linear perspective, And at the same time, he's using crosshatch lines. He's using his pen to create different values. His pen also has darker lines on the outline, and there's a good variation of line quality. And at the same time, there's a nice balance in this illustration. This balance of how he used marker to make the contrasting black floor, which ends up balancing out all of the white throughout the rest of his drawings. So Sergio Rodriguez, a Brazilian designer, you are going to copy this drawing for the second part of your perspective assignment. And I really hope that you are kind of like take your time with it. Notice details, like see how there's like a white line around this line here. And also just really getting to know your micron pens. If you have microns or whatever pens you have, getting to use your pens in a way that feels very controlled. And also, I mean, there's so much beautiful cross-hatching line work that it's definitely controlled and detailed and just really like mature, but very, very simple at the same time. I mean, even this perspective actually is a little off in this lamp here, but still, you're going to copy this, and then you'll see in the third part of your assignment that you are going to choose any type of perspective that you want, and you are going to do, in this style, you're going to do a drawing of a space, and it can be an interior space or an exterior space, but I want you to do it in this style of using cross-hatching lines and also using a big portion of black to fill up some part of your drawing. So I hope that this makes sense. Please just go through the assignments, read through that. That'll probably, I know it's hard to, wish that you were all here so I could just answer your questions that you may have, but please just look over the assignment and follow the instructions and just let me know if you have any questions. All right.